Good morning, Mossbrook. I saw a little thing come up on my phone that the frequency for the radio has changed. I think it's 88.3, so anyone who is going to tune into that, you will want to get that right. Let's jump right in this morning. Come set your rule and reign in our hearts again. Increase in us, we pray. Unveil why we're made. Come set our hearts ablaze with hope, like wildfire in our very souls. Holy Spirit, come invade us now. We are your church. We need your power in us. We seek your kingdom first. We hunger and we thirst. Refuse to waste our lives, for you're our joy and prize. To see the captive hearts released, the hurt, the sick, the poor at peace. We lay down our lives for heaven's cause. We are your church. We pray, revive this earth. Build your kingdom here. Let the darkness fear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and let. Set your church on fire. Win this nation back. Change the atmosphere. Build your kingdom here. We pray. Build your kingdom here. Let the darkness fear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and land. Set your church on fire. Win this nation back. Change the atmosphere. Build your kingdom here. We pray. We're going to go to verse 3. Sorry about that. Unleash your kingdom's power, reaching the near and far. No force of hell can stop your beauty changing hearts. We've made us for much more than this. Awake the kingdom seed in us. Fill us with the strength and love of Christ. We are your church. We are the hope on earth. Build your kingdom here. Let the darkness fear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and land. Set your church on fire. Win this nation back. Change the atmosphere. Build your kingdom here. We pray. Build your kingdom here. Let the darkness fear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and land. Set your church on fire. Win this nation back. Change the atmosphere. Build your kingdom here. We pray. Amen. Thanks for following along with us there. We welcome you this morning. So good to see you, Mossbrook. We are the church, and God is building it, and he said the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And it's so awesome to watch God work throughout history and throughout the world, and to just watch him build his church and the things that he does, and bringing us all from all these different places geographically and just walks of life, our histories, where we've come from. And but we're all from the same root. Christ is our root, and we're alive through him. And really, we all have the same version of testimony. We were dead in our sins, and we deserve to be there because we sinned against our holy creator God. And yet, but God, being rich in mercy, because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved, and raised us up with him. We were physically alive, we were breathing, but spiritually dead. And he saved us and raised us up with him. So let's sing together, testify together. We have the same story, just different details. I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb till I met you. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave. Together, church. I needed rescue. My sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter. I was an orphan. Now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a few
thank you guys. You can all have a seat this morning. It is so good to see you. Want to welcome everybody that's joining us on our live stream this morning as well. Glad that you folks can be with us. I want you to know as well, if you're out there on the live stream and you're in the area, there's plenty of good seats available here. So we'd love to have you join us here in person as well. And also to all you folks that are in your cars, I was talking to somebody a few minutes ago this morning, and I said, I don't even know who all is coming because I can't see all the cars and I don't know who's in there, but we're glad that you're with us together today. As Tara has already reminded us and challenged us, we are the church. And we are so glad to be able to gather here this morning. I'm going to let the kids go. To my left, to your right, if you have some kids and you've got them signed in, now's the time to kick them out of the nest there and let them go with Andrea and her team over there. If you haven't already signed them in, you can do that at the table. And they're going to go and do some stuff together over the next 45 minutes or so. So we'll let them go. Thank you for continuing to pray for the Meserve family. We did have a memorial service for Jeff yesterday in his hometown of Dayton with his family and a lot of friends down there. We were able to spend the afternoon together and had a good time with them and a good service. So thank you for those of you that knew that was happening and prayed for us. And just remind you that for us here in our area as Jeff and Julie's church family, that next Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock, we will be having a gathering at the Young's Farm and Greenhouse, 649 High Street, where we've had some of our baptisms in the past. If you're familiar with that, just down the road out on High Street, we'll be meeting there from 1 to 4. And just a time to gather, visit, spend some time with Julie and Ariana and Noah, and just visit together. And then at 2 o'clock, we're going to be having a memorial service, and then we're going to be having dinner together after that as well. So we'd invite you to join us. Love to have you be there for that with us. So continue to pray for the Meserve family. And they wanted me to pass along a thank you for remembering them before the Lord as well over these last couple of weeks. We are also excited to have our friend and sister Holly Corning with us this morning. A few years ago, we sent Holly to the other side of the world, to Turkey, and she has been over there for the past few years, serving and making friends and contacts and doing all the things that God has called her to do over there. She's been back here in the States for a little while, and I'm going to let her update you a little bit on that and just share what God's been doing in her life.
Good morning. Good morning. Question of the day. Is God faithful? Yes. Is he really? I know it's easy to say yes, especially at church when you're asked a question like that, but is he? When you look at your own life, are there times when you feel like, where is he? Is he really faithful? Has he forgotten me? Have you been there? My guess is I'm not the only one who's felt that way. 9 years ago, it wasn't just down the road a few years ago, it was 9 years ago that I moved to Turkey. And I struggled for the first 3 years of learning Turkish. And I finally passed the final exam, and I'm like, yes, I can finally do what I'm supposed to be doing here. And I started dealing with some pretty bad back issues. And over time, those deteriorated and became full body, pain everywhere, I can't do anything issues. Really? Is he faithful? And I found out in 2019 when I was home that I was dealing with mold toxicity or mold poisoning. And that was good news. It was nice to finally have a diagnosis. Good to know finally what to do. I headed back to Turkey. I moved out of my apartment, moved into a brand new, never been lived in apartment, and sold everything I owned. Because mold will recontaminate your new place if you bring stuff with you. And changed my diet. I went from eating everything I could eat to vegetables and meat, and that was it. And praise God, your prayers were answered. The joint pain went away. And I was feeling great, except that the brain fog didn't go away. And I was looking like I was having dementia. And I had no idea what I had done yesterday. And I couldn't remember words and people's names. And it was getting scary. And my energy level was so low that after 10 hours of sleep a night, I could drag my way through a 2-hour Bible study. And then I'd go home and crash.
And I had gotten to the point of realizing I either have to tough it out and make it work, or I have to quit. I can't do my job, and I have to move home. And I had been fighting for years, like fighting to learn this language, fighting to get better. And it was a crazy thing to think, is the fighting over? Do I need to stop? And thankfully, my leadership in Turkey said, you know what, there's a third option. We want you to go home. We want you to find a specialist. Don't go back to Maine. Go somewhere where there's specialists and see if you can get better. And if you can, we'll give you another chance in Turkey. And so in January, I moved to Texas because there was a specialist there. But I don't know anybody in Texas. And so how do I find a house? How do I find a car? And yet I've had 2 cars that someone have lent me for free. And I have a cute little house that I have in someone's backyard. And I'm not paying rent on it. They let me have it for free. So, yeah, woo is right. Yeah, amazing. At the same time, guess what? Doctors are not free. And when you're dealing with something like mold toxicity, your general doctors don't really acknowledge it, and therefore insurance won't acknowledge it either. And so in 3 months' time, I paid what I make in a year. And here's the cool thing about God. I don't know how, but I am still debt-free. Yeah. And so, pretty amazing, right? And my plan was, okay, I'm going to go, and I'm going to spend 2 or 3 months getting better, and then I'm going to go back to Turkey. And as you all know, something happened in those time period. This thing called COVID, right? And I'm suddenly stuck in a place where I have nobody, no community, no nothing, and I'm stuck in my home by myself. And God used that, because that's how God works, right? He knew I needed alone time to reconnect with him. And he reminded me of something I told him 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I said, God, whatever you want me to do, wherever you want me to go, I'll go. I'll do it. And I echoed the prayer that Isaiah said in Isaiah 6. Here I am, send me. And what I hadn't realized was subconsciously, over those 9 years, my prayer had changed. And I started saying, God, I've been faithful. God, I've endured. Don't you dare take me away from where I want to be. Have you been there? Has your prayer slowly changed? And in that time of alone, God brought me back to a place of surrender. And it hasn't been easy, and it hasn't been fun, but guess what, guys? Surrender's good. God can use us when we're surrendered. And so once again, I'm saying, God, whatever you want me to do, wherever you want me to go. And so here's the thing. After years and years and years of being sick, I am feeling the best I have felt in years. Praise God. You've been praying. I thank you for that. But here's the crazy thing. I have to avoid mold at all cost, or I will get sick again. That's just how this works. My body doesn't detox correctly. So the question begs to be answered. Can I go back to Turkey? Can I continue to work in that church that is full of mold? Can I continue to meet with my friends in restaurants that are full of mold? I don't know. And if not, what do I do? Do I come back here, and how do I have a job in a building that's full of mold? And where do I live? Because buildings in America, too, are full of mold. And I'm a logical person. And I like to logic things out, and I like to write them down, and I like to have a plan. And I've been trying to logic this one out. And guess what? I can't. And every time I try, I hear God whisper, just wait. Guys, I don't know. I'm going back to Texas in a few days. I can't stay there forever in this free house. It would be nice if I could. But I can't, right? I need to figure out what my life is going to be, and I have no idea. And yet I am convinced that God is faithful. Even when it doesn't seem like he's faithful. Even when it doesn't seem like he's there, guess what? He is still faithful. And we can trust him. And so I don't know what's next. But I do know the God who's going to lead me. And he's going to lead you too. He's a good God. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Holly. Let's sing about that powerful God who's faithful at all times. see waters raging at my feet. I can feel the breath of those surrounding me. I can hear the sound of nations rising up. We will not be overtaken. We will not be overcome. I can walk down this dark and painful road. I can face every fear of the unknown. I can hear all God's people singing out. We will not be overtaken. We will not be overcome. The same power that rose Jesus from the grave, the same power that commands the dead to wake, lives in us, lives in us. The same power that moves mountains when he speaks, the same power that can calm a raging sea, lives in us, lives in us. He lives in us, lives in us. We have hope that his promises are true. In his strength there is nothing we can't do. Yes, we know there are greater things in store. We will not be overtaken. We will not be overcome. The same power that rose Jesus from the grave, the same power that commands the dead to wake, lives in us, lives in us. The same power that moves mountains when he speaks, the same power that can calm a raging sea, lives in us, lives in us. He lives in us, lives in us. Greater is he that is living in me. He's conquered our enemy. No power of darkness, no weapon prevails. We stand here in victory. Oh, greater is he that is living in me. He's conquered our enemy. Oh yes, no power of darkness, no weapon prevails. We stand here in victory. Oh, in victory. Yeah. The same power that rose Jesus from the grave, the same power that commands the dead to wake, lives in us, lives in us. The same power that moves mountains when he speaks, the same power that can calm a raging sea, lives in us. He lives in us. He lives in us. Lives in us. Amen. Let's join with heaven and worship our holy, holy God. We stand in awe of him, and we can't help but sing. No pen or quill, no scribe in perfect skill, with flawless words could capture all you are. No lofty thought, no scholar of this world could grasp an inch of of such infinity. Though we cannot comprehend such a mystery, just a glimpse of you revealed is compelling us to say, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. Worthy, worthy is your name. All of heaven joins the universe, ever crying, worthy, worthy is your name. With hearts amazed and songs that never fade, the fullness of your worth and majesty, we come again and fall on bended knee, and here adore the God that we don't see. Though we cannot comprehend such a mystery, just a glimpse of you revealed is compelling us to sing. Holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. Worthy, worthy is your name. All of heaven joins the universe, ever crying, worthy, worthy is your name. Yes, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. Worthy, worthy is your name. All of heaven joins the universe, ever crying, worthy, worthy is your name. Worthy is your name. When you return, we'll hear the trumpet sound, and you'll lead us home, riding on the clouds, where we will stand and sing forevermore the honor and the praise. The glory is the Lord. Yes, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. Worthy, worthy is your name. All of heaven joins the universe, ever crying, worthy, worthy is your name. Sing, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. Worthy, worthy is your name. All of heaven joins the universe, ever crying, worthy, worthy is your name. Yes, worthy, worthy is your name. Jesus, worthy, worthy is your name. Worthy is your name.
Father, we are here this morning as your servants, as your children. We are so grateful for the grace and mercy that you have shown us through Jesus Christ. We are thankful that he is the Holy One, and because of it, he is the worthy one. We trust that everything that we say and do here this morning will bring glory to that worthy name. Thank you for these moments to come together to worship and now to focus our attention on your word, and our prayer is singular. Speak to us, Father. Speak to us today by your word through the Spirit, that we may learn that we may grow, that we may understand your faithfulness in a deeper way today, that our reliance on you would expand, that we would know and be reminded that you alone are God. Thank you for these moments. Quiet our hearts, free us from distraction as we listen for your voice today. In Christ's name, amen. Thank you, folks. You can be seated. This may sound like kind of a strange thing to say at the beginning of my message this morning, but it'll make sense in a second. But a lot of you still, even though I know not all of you have known me for 16 years, but I've been here for 16 years, and a lot of you still seem a little bit murky on my nationality. I am an American. I come from the United States of America. Okay? I was born here in Maine, like many of you, but my wife is Canadian. Yes, Tim and Pam are also Canadian. Just because those three are doesn't mean that I am, okay? Just so you know. I did live over there for a few years in my teenage years and early 20s. And part of the reason for that is because my mother is Canadian. So I know I'm really not clearing this up for you this morning, but my mother is Canadian, my wife is Canadian, and so on and so forth. I'm a U.S. citizen. But my mom grew up in New Brunswick in the same town that she and my dad still live in, the town that Melody and Tim grew up in as well. And rural New Brunswick, some of you don't know this, but rural New Brunswick is a lot like rural Maine. The border, you cross the border, yes, but once you get across, it's hard to tell the difference. It's an agricultural economy in that part of the province that my mom grew up in, and she grew up on a dairy farm. My grandfather was a farmer, and he was the old-fashioned kind of farmer, not the kind now that have the air-conditioned dual-wheel tractors that, and 2,000 acres of potatoes or grain or whatever. He was an old-fashioned farmer. Small dairy farm, a few cows that he milked. They raised some steers for meat. They had chickens. He had some potatoes, some corn, some barley, some oats, and of course lots of hay for the animals. Just an old-fashioned farm. And some years were really good, and some years were not so good. And if you have any experience in farming, or maybe even just your gardening experience, you know that there's a lot of factors that go into that. If there's enough rain, or if we have a really dry summer, or if we have a lot of damaging storms that cause problems with the crops in the field in the summer, or having good harvest days in the late summer or the fall. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong. So growing up on this farm, my mom and my grandparents and their family had good years and bad years, but God provided for them, and they raised a family of 10 kids on that little dairy farm. And I was thinking about that this week, and I was thinking about the passage of Scripture I want to share with you this morning, and I thought about how blind we have become to God's faithfulness. How blind we have become to God's gracious care of us in this age in which we live, because our hearts and minds in this culture are set on bigger and better, aren't they? Nod your head if you think that I'm right. Nod your head even if you're not sure. It encourages me to keep going, okay? We tend to think bigger and better, don't we? What happens when a couple gets married and they move into that little one-bedroom apartment that's 400 square feet or whatever it is? What do they think? Well, we're just starting out, right? And even sometimes people buy a house and they say, this is our what? This is our starter house. And this is our hand-me-down furniture that we're going to replace with new furniture. And we have a car, but we want a newer car. We have an income and we want a bigger income. We have a home, we want a nicer one. It's just the way that our minds work, bigger and better. So much so that we always dismiss sufficient. And the reality is that bigger and better doesn't always happen. Now, most of you have lived enough life to know that. You realize that. It's not always bigger and better. Well, this is week 11 of the whole story, our journey through all 66 books of the Bible, and we find ourselves in 1 Kings. And what we're doing as we walk through this, if you're new to the study, if you're not, and you remember all the things that we say every week, then you can tune out for 2 minutes. If you don't remember everything that we say every week, then you better pay attention. This is the whole story. The Bible is the story of God redeeming a people for himself and bringing glory to his name by doing that. And we're also seeing in all of these books that God is revealing his character to us. He's showing us things about himself. He wants us to know who he is. And we're also seeing Jesus Christ as we walk through the Word of God. We're seeing that Jesus Christ is shown in pictures and in prophecies. And we see him very clearly, even before he has come to this earth. And in 1 Kings, Israel has continued her wicked ways. Now already, we're only in book 11 of 39 in the Old Testament. And then there's another 27 to go once we get to the New Testament. And already, how many times have we seen Israel turn her back on God? How many times have we seen Israel turn and walk the other direction and do their own thing? But this morning, as we look at 1 Kings, we're going to see his care and provision and protection for those who trust him. This is what I want you to understand as we go through here, folks. Understand that even in wicked times, even when we look out and we see nothing but wickedness all around us, God preserves a remnant of people for himself. There has never been one moment in all of human civilization since the Garden of Eden, there's never been one moment, despite all of the wickedness, that there hasn't been a people called by God's name. A people who love him, a people who serve him. God always preserves a remnant, even when it isn't easy. And there are some very important lessons for us here this morning. Here's our big idea that I want you to just put in your mind for the next few minutes, that God always provides for those who walk with him. God always provides for those who walk with him. Now, 1 Kings chapter 17, I'm going to read a few verses for you. Let's jump right in, and then we'll draw some things out that are important for us to notice. Now, Elijah, the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead, said to Ahab, who was the king of Israel at that time, "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, there shall neither be dew nor rain these years, except by my word." Now let's take a little straw poll here. How many people have heard of Elijah? You've heard of Elijah. Okay, all right. Most of you have heard of Elijah. Elijah is a major prophet in the Old Testament. This is the very first time we hear him mentioned. Now, something that's interesting about Elijah, at least it's interesting to me, and I'm up here and you're there, so I'm going to tell you, and hopefully it's interesting to you, but we don't know anything about Elijah. We have no idea who this guy is. We only know that he's from some place called Tishbe. That's all we know. But his name means the Lord is God. And so we see Elijah coming onto the scene. He is a man of God. God is using him here, and he makes this very bold and potentially very dangerous to him prophecy. It's not going to rain. Not even going to be any dew. It's over. Because God has said it so. Now, we didn't look at these passages when we were in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, but if you had read through those, you would have seen that God actually specifically told the people of Israel, if you follow other gods, I will take the rain away. He actually promised that specific thing, that he would withhold the rain. And so, Israel had walked away. Remember, we've seen, haven't we, many, many times they walked away from him when they came out of the land of Egypt. Remember, that's why they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. They actually got to the promised land, had one battle, walked away from him again, repented. God brought him back. He gave them victory. He gave them the whole land. We get into the book of Judges. What happens? Time and time again, they turn away from God. So God said, that's it. I'm withholding the rain. It's done. Now, we don't read this here, but there's a parallel passage or a related passage over in the book of James, chapter 5, that tells us it actually didn't rain for 3.5 years. I don't know about you guys, but that's a pretty severe drought. I mean, it didn't rain for 2 weeks back in June, and my lawn was brown. Imagine 3.5 years of no rain because of Israel's unfaithfulness. Just to give you a little bit of context, it's been 100 years since last week. Remember last week? King David, I want to build you a house. And God said, you're not building me a house, but I'm building you a house. I'm going to establish your kingdom for eternity. And we saw that that was a prophecy of Jesus Christ. It's been 100 years since that happened, since King David. And it has not gone very well. If you were to read the rest of 2 Samuel and you were to start reading the first 16 chapters of 1 Kings, you would find out that many of the kings of Israel have been evil. And 1 Corinthians 16 tells us that King Ahab was the most evil one to date. They were all one-upping each other. Every king was more evil than the king before him. Now, some of you, I bet, have heard of Ahab's wife. King Ahab and Queen, anybody know what her name was? Jezebel. Queen Jezebel. And Jezebel and Ahab led the nation of Israel into Baal worship. That was the name of the god that they worshiped, B-A-A-L, Baal. Now, here's something very interesting about the idol Baal. Baal was called the god of the storm. And Baal was the one who supposedly controlled the rain. And so this is a deliberate act of God here to show the nation of Israel, it's not Baal that's controlling things. It's not Baal that is sending you the rain so that your crops will grow. It's me. And so God deliberately flies in the face of that to let them know who is really in control. Okay, enough background. 1 Kings 17:2. And the word of the Lord came to him, that is Elijah, again, depart from here and turn eastward and hide yourself by the brook Cherith, which is east of the Jordan. Now, 4 times in the few verses we're going to read, it says the word of the Lord. Elijah was wholly dependent upon God for direction. And Elijah goes into the throne room. I mean, he goes to King Ahab, the most powerful person in the land, and says, because of your wickedness, there's not going to be any rain. That's a dangerous thing to say to a wicked king, because God said so. And so God came to Elijah a second time. He says, you better get out of there. Get out of there. And I want you to go to this brook east of the Jordan. Now, actually, the brook Cherith, nobody knows where that is. It was so small, it's not on any maps. All that we can imagine is that it was a little runoff that maybe had water in it in the rainy season and dried up in the dry season. But God said, that's where I want you to go. Verse 4. God's still speaking. You shall drink from the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. So he went and did according to the word of the Lord, and he went and lived by the brook Cherith that is east of the Jordan. So this is where you're going to get your water, Elijah. We all know that you can't survive very many days without water. And so you're going to get your water out of here from this little brook. Now, Elijah immediately had to be thinking, well, this isn't going to last long because Cherith dries up every year and it's not raining. But anyway, this is where I'm going to drink. And the ravens are going to feed you. Now, this is where it kind of gets interesting to me because ravens eat dead animals, right? I mean, everybody knows that. All you got to do is open your eye. Please open your eyes when you're driving down the road or the highway, because there are ravens everywhere. And what are they doing? They're cleaning up all the dead animals, all the roadkill. Ravens eat carrion is the proper polite name for it. They eat dead, rotting animals. So there would be no five-star dining for Elijah alongside the brook Cherith as he camped there. But he would survive, and it was food. And this is what I want you to notice. It says, God said, I have commanded the ravens to do this. The word commanded means to appoint or to charge. And this is what we need to see. That in the middle of devastating circumstances, God was miraculously providing for Elijah. God determined that this would happen. He said, this is the way that it's going to work. This is what I'm going to do. He prepared it. He decided it. It was no accident. It was not by chance. Elijah didn't go to the brook and see a raven picking at a groundhog carcass and decide to go over there and rip off a ribeye. I don't know if groundhogs have ribeyes, but that's not it. It wasn't by chance. The ravens came and they brought Elijah the food. So what did Elijah do? He listened. Verse 6. And the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. So what happened? Exactly what God said happened. What God intended, what he purposed, and it lasted, I want you to notice in this next verse, just as long as God intended for it to happen. Verse 7, after a while, the brook dried up because there was no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him and said, arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow there to feed you. So inevitably the brook dried up. I mean, who didn't see this coming? We knew it was going to happen. We knew Cherith was going to dry up. Everything was drying up because there was no rain. Why was there no rain? Because God said there was not going to be any rain. But still, God was caring for Elijah. What happened next? God spoke again. This is what I'm doing to prepare and to provide for you. And he told him to go to Zarephath. Now, if your Middle Eastern geography is about like mine, you have no idea where Zarephath is, but Zarephath is a long ways from where Elijah was. It's all the way over to the Mediterranean Sea, and in fact, it's not even in the nation of Israel. It's out of the country. But what it is, or what it was the center of Baal worship. It wasn't just a place that worshiped Baal, it was the central Baal worship place in the civilized world. So God called Elijah into even more dangerous territory. It was bad enough that he was in Israel where Ahab and Jezebel were in power and they were evil and they were commanding the people to worship Baal and everybody was going for it. Everybody was just diving in and doing what they weren't supposed to do. Now he says, Elijah, I want you to go here, the center of Baal worship. And he said, I've commanded a widow there to feed you. Now, this word commanded is the same one that we saw in verse 4. That means God appointed it. He purposed it. He prepared it. God had planned for this widow to feed Elijah, just like he planned for the ravens. And I know it doesn't look like this when you're reading it, but this widow providing for Elijah was almost as unlikely as the ravens doing it. Because in this culture, widows were destitute. In many places, they weren't even allowed to work. We found out that she had a family. Later, we learned that she had a son. But she had no income. And there was a drought. And so she was even more desperate. And we learned just how desperate she was if we read those verses. Because when Elijah goes to Zarephath and God leads him to this widow, their paths cross at just the place God intended for it to cross. And Elijah says, God has asked me to ask you to make me a meal. You know what the widow said? She said, sir, I can't do that. She said, I'm gathering twigs to make a fire. I'm going to make one last meal for myself and my son, and then we're going to die. That's how desperate they were. They didn't have anything. And Elijah says, cook me a meal first. Now, I don't know about you guys, how many times, some of you have read this passage before, probably. I don't know about you, but at first glance, that doesn't seem very gracious of Elijah, does it? A widow and her son, and her plan is, I'm going to make a meal, and then we're going to starve to death. And Elijah says, well, here's the thing. Why don't you make me a meal first? Not very gentlemanly. Why does he do that? Because God told him to, first of all, and also because God has promised, and Elijah tells her this, God has promised her if she would make Elijah a meal first, then she would not run out of food for herself and her son and Elijah on top of it until the rains come. What a step of faith for this woman. This would be like you and I on our way to Hannaford with our last $10 bill to get some ramen noodles, to make one last meal, because that's all we can afford, and then we're out of food. It would be like us going with our last $10 to do that, and someone comes to us and says, I desperately need you to make me a meal. What a step of faith for this woman. This is what she was doing. She was risking everything. Verse 15. And she went and did as Elijah said, and she and he and her household ate for many days. The jar of flour was not spent, neither did the jug of oil become empty, according to the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. God miraculously made it last for all of them. Why did the flour last? Why did the oil last? Why did it? Because God said that it would. Because God determined that that is how he was going to provide for Elijah and how he was going to provide for this woman and her son. He purposed it. He determined it. I want you to see this. That in the middle of this pagan culture, in extremely devastating circumstances, God provided the needs of those who trusted him. Now, guess where I'm going to go with this to apply this to us? The exact same thing. Friends, God will always provide for you when you walk with him. As Holly shared with us just a few minutes ago, how do you pay out your year's salary and medical bills and still have money to pay your other bills? I've sat on cash before. It does not multiply by itself. I put it in dark places. I've buried it in the ground. I've watered and fertilized it. It doesn't multiply. It doesn't grow. How is that possible? It's only possible because God provides for those who walk with him. He promises that we will have what we need to do what God has called us to do. Now, hear me. This does not always mean that you will have abundance or luxury. How many times in our lives, when we think about the things we don't have, when we complain about the things that we don't have, how many times are they the needs of the day so that we can continue to the next day? Or are they the luxuries that we want over and above what we already have? We will have what we need to do what God has called us to do. God is revealing his character to us. He is revealing to us that he is the provider for all of those who trust him. In Genesis chapter 22, God says to Abraham, who has one son, Isaac, the son that's the fulfillment of all God's promises to him. He says, Abraham, take that son and sacrifice him to me. How much sense does that make? Abraham had to be thinking, I can't do that, God. This is the guy. This is the kid. This is the son. Without him, there's no promise. But he goes, he shows his willingness to sacrifice his son, and what does God do? God provides a ram to sacrifice. Abraham builds an altar. He offers the ram with Isaac as a sacrifice to the Almighty God, and he makes a memorial there. And do you know what? Abraham names the place. Do you know what he named the place? He named it Jehovah Jireh. Do you know what Jehovah Jireh means? It means the God who provides. God is the provider. And this is a lesson that we need to learn today. We live very comfortable lives. And our idea of need is skewed because God doesn't provide us luxury, but he promises us that our needs will be met. And my friends, I want you to know this. We don't talk about this in our culture, but we need to. Even that is limited. God promises to provide our needs, but even that is limited. Do you know what it's limited by? It's limited by the moment that our time on earth is done. God doesn't even promise to provide these needs in perpetuity on this earth. He says, I will provide you what you need for as long as you need it. When you don't need it anymore, I will not provide it for you because I am the one who determines your life. Of course, we've lost our dear friend Jeff in the last couple of weeks. Jeff is 52 years old. 3 weeks ago, I turned 50, and I'm thinking, 52 is a lot younger than it seemed 25 years ago. 52 years old. I thought God was going to provide for us. I thought he would care for us. I thought he would give us the health and the strength that we need. God did fulfill that promise to Jeff. He gave him the health and strength that he needed until the day that his life was over. Because God is the one who determines our days, who measures our steps, who gives us what we need based on what he determines that we need. We don't talk about that, do we? Well, God's going to provide. We're going to have everything that we need. Yes, we will. Until we don't need it anymore. By God's determination. When we misunderstand this, we accuse God, we doubt God, we blame God, we turn away from God. I bet some of you have done it. You've said, I need this and I don't have it. God, why are you doing this? We blame him. We need to understand something, folks. This dark time in our country may get darker. It may get darker. Now, I'm like you. I'm watching everything that's going on, and I'm saying, Lord, please, please work in this country. Turn things around. I'm praying that, and I hope you're praying that. It's right that we should. 2 Chronicles 7:14. We are commanded to pray for our country, and we should do that. But there is no promise in God's word that we will be spared difficulty. In fact, there are promises that we won't be spared difficulty. We've looked at them before. But like Elijah, God promises us that we will have what we need for as long as we need it. And then what? Well, friends, and then we turn to verses like John chapter 4. In John chapter 4, when Jesus tells the woman at the well, what does he tell her? He says, I will give you living water, and you'll never be thirsty again. You don't have to depend on this brook that's going to dry up, because I'm going to give you living water, and you'll never be thirsty. And then in John chapter 6, what does Jesus say? He says, I am the bread of life, and you'll never be hungry again. Jesus Christ is seen here in 1 Kings as well as your ultimate provision, not just for this life, but for all of eternity. My friends, I don't know about you, but I'll tell you one thing, one hope that I cling to every single day, and that is when my food and water is gone and my strength is gone on this earth, I will be in the presence of God and I'll never be thirsty or hungry again. I'll never have another need again in the presence of God, because that is his promise to us. If you're looking at your life right now and you're thinking, I don't have enough finances to last an indefinite amount of time. If you're thinking that, you're right. You don't. No one does. And God never intended for it to be that way. It is a shame for us how dependent we have become on what this world provides. Because what matters is eternity. What matters is eternity. You'll never be thirsty again. You'll never be hungry again. Because Jesus Christ is our provision. Is Christ enough? Is he enough for you? That's the lesson of 1 Kings 17. We're going to sing that song. And I beg you this morning, folks, don't just sing it. Think about it. Mean it. Is Christ enough?
Let's sing together. Christ is my reward and all of my devotion. Now there's nothing in this world that could ever satisfy. Through every trial, my soul will sing, no turning back. I've been set free. Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you. Everything I need. Christ, my all in all, the joy of my salvation. And this hope will never fail. Heaven is our home. Oh, through every storm, my soul will sing. Jesus is here. To God be the glory. Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you. Everything I need, yeah. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No
decided to follow Jesus.
No turning back, no turning back.
The Apostle Paul learned those lessons. That's why in Philippians 4 he said, I've learned to deal with wherever I am. If I have a lot, if I don't have much, I'm content. That's why in Philippians 1:21, Paul was able to say, to me, to live is Christ, to die is gain. And a teacher in Bible school who said this, it's not gain to die unless it's Christ to live. How are you living? That's what matters, friends. What's your perspective? Is it all about what this world provides or what Christ provides? That's the difference. Father, thank you for your goodness to us. You are gracious. You have provided what we have needed, that is without doubt. Many things we have wanted but do not have. Forgive us for focusing on those things. Cause us to fix our eyes on Jesus Christ, the living water, the bread of life, the resurrection and the life, the door, the way, the truth, and the life. He is our life. I pray that you will give us the grace and strength to live that way. In Christ's name, amen. Thanks for coming, folks. Hope you have a great week.